The headlines read: UK model kidnapped in Italy. Blonde model's body is drugged and forced into a suitcase. Model feared dead in dark web sex auction. Photos of terrified female model have appeared on sex trafficking websites.
I've been through a terrifying experience. I feared for my life, second by second, minute by minute, hour by hour. I am incredibly grateful to the Italian and UK authorities for all they have done to secure my safe release. I have just arrived home after 4 weeks of being in Italy, and I haven't had the time to gather my thoughts. I am not at liberty to say anything further until I have been debriefed by the UK police.
Welcome to Extraordinary Stories podcast. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. Hello, Leslie Upshaw, waiting patiently for the new episode. Hello, Alison Shields, and your talented son. Thanks for all the general engagement all over all the social media. Thanks very much for all of your engagement in the group. Thank you very much for getting involved with my graffiti and street art post that I put up. I had a phone call the other day, right? I'll just tell you this very quickly before we get on with this. We get on with the stories. I had a phone call the other day with a guy called Steve who's helping me do some technical stuff with the podcast. I just needed a bit of a hand with some technical stuff, and while we were kind of sorting through stuff, we were just sort of chit-chatting, and he said to me, "Oh yeah, I was looking through some of the podcast groups that are on Facebook. Yeah, there's quite a few of them, isn't there?" And I was like, yeah. It seems like every podcast, has their own group. And he said, "Your group's it's pretty mad, isn't it?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, I mean it in a really good way. There's just some really interesting people in there, isn't there?" And I said, yeah, there is. I think they're fucking amazing. People, yeah, I think the extras are pretty fucking amazing. So thank you for your continued putting up of sometimes really random, sometimes really, really honest, really brutal, really current stuff that's going on. So yeah, thanks for that. Okay, this episode. 2 stories, 2 females, 2 incredible events, 31 years apart. Okay, let's go. Story 1 is the very recent ongoing case of Chloe Ayling. So who is Chloe? Well, Chloe is a British glamour model. She is 30 years old. To describe Chloe so that you have a picture of her, she has long blonde hair. She has an hourglass figure. She's about 5'3", and her breast size is double D. I don't really know much about breast size, but she's breast size double D according to something that I read about her. So Chloe is a glamour model, sort of boobs out, bum out kind of model, that kind of idea. She's not terribly well known. I think she's working for some different magazines, some different publications where, she sort of it gets a bit of flesh out here and there. I think she had actually done page 3 in the UK. And page 3, if you're not familiar with it, page 3 is a thing that the Sun newspaper, which is Britain's best-selling newspaper, and has been, I think, for, I don't know, I'm going to say about 50, 60 years. So the Sun newspaper used to do a thing called page 3, which was basically you would have obviously your cover page with all the headlines on it. You would open it and you would be greeted with a female with her breasts out. And this it became a bit of a sort of British institution it became a bit of a thing. Like, people would become famous because they had been a page 3 model. It was, I remember, like, I'm sorry, I'm diverting slightly. I'm just going to tell you this. I can remember the days when my dad used to drink Tennent's lager, and on the side of the can of lager, you would have the same page 3 models with their boobs out on the side of those cans. That sounds terrible. That sounds like I'm saying that about my dad. I'm not. I just think there was a time in the, like, I think it was probably mid to late 80s where, yeah, you would have beer cans with women with their breasts out on the side. It's unbelievable now. It's unfucking believable to think that ever really existed. God. Anyway, they did away with page 3. They got rid of it. There was so many people, and I think it was the right thing to do. I think it was, it's time to get rid of it. It's like so objectifying to put so many young models in that position where they're, in that place in page 3 with the boobs out. So page 3 disappeared. But Chloe, at some point in her life, she had been a page 3 model. So not very well known as a model, I wouldn't say. Not necessarily famous in any way. Just working away, doing her own thing. She'd got a couple of headlines here and there because during one of her modelling jobs, she had been in Paris during the time of a terrorist attack, and she used her kind of social media to talk about what it was like to be in Paris while there was an attack happening. Chloe says she was asked by her agent, Phil Green, to go to Italy, to Milan specifically, for a modelling job. One day after her arrival in Italy, the news and the internet will be flooded with headlines that Chloe has been kidnapped and forced into a suitcase. Big, dramatic headlines. There were huge headlines over here in the UK. I don't know if they made global news, but the story goes like this. Just before we get into it, I'm just going to say one thing. I'm going to use one phrase, and I'm only going to use it once. Don't let what I'm saying influence you. I'm just going to say it once. The phrase is, Chloe says. Chloe says she gets to Italy and her agent has given her the address for the shoot. She arrives at the address and she's immediately surprised. She doesn't think it looks like the kind of place that a photo shoot would normally proceed. Wouldn't be your normal kind of place. It's not a studio. It's just a building. It's just a building in the middle of a street in a strange, unknown to Chloe part of Italy. She says alarm bells were ringing when she walked into the building, and there was no activity. There was no one there to meet her. There were no photographers. There was nothing going on. There was just no activity. There was nothing happening. Instead, there was just silence. So she sees a sign on the door which says studio. And assuming that that's where she's meant to go, she knocks on the door. The door opens, and as it's opening, a man wearing a mask comes behind Chloe and he puts his arm around her neck. As this happens, another man in a mask appears in front of her. He produces a syringe and he injects her in the wrist. What he injects Chloe with is the drug ketamine. So ketamine, if you don't know, is a horse tranquilizer. It's not the most popular, I don't think, of recreational drugs, but it certainly has its place within recreational drugs. There was a time when a lot of clubs were coming down really hard on ketamine. It gets sort of used a lot as a sex drug. So as the effects of the ketamine injection are taking over her body, she says she still couldn't connect at this point that the shoot that she was there to do wasn't going to go ahead. I find that confusing. I find that bit of information sort of odd. That she's been injected and she's drowsy and she's thinking, hang on, surely the photo shoot's still going to go ahead? I don't think it's going to. I don't think it will. But yeah, so she says that's what she was thinking at that point. The next thing in Chloe's story is the moment she wakes up after the injection. She is in the boot of a car. She has tape on her mouth, tape on her hands, and her feet are tied. The car was moving, and as she became conscious and aware of where she was, she begins to shout and scream. She's shouting to the driver to stop the car. The car eventually stops. It pulls over, and she hears the engine switch off. The two masked men, they open the boot, and Chloe continues to scream and shout. She's asking, where is she? What's happening? What the hell is going on for her at this moment? They don't answer. They give her no answer whatsoever. What they do is they take her body and they turn it round the other way so that she's not facing out of the car. Essentially, she's now facing in to the car. And through a gap in the boot, in the back of the car, she sees something which makes her blood run cold. She sees a suitcase on the back seat. Chloe says at this moment she believes she was looking at her coffin, and she began to pray for a non-painful death. From here, Chloe was taken to another location. She was blindfolded, so she has no idea where this other second location was. In this location, she was stripped naked and she was photographed. After a couple of hours of being photographed, completely naked, she was moved to another location, this time much further away, 120 miles away from where she had originally turned up for the shoot. And the place she was taken to was a farmhouse. Once inside, the two men who had taken Chloe, they chained her to a large wooden chest and they kept her here for a week. Who were these kidnappers? Why were they doing this? Well, these two men were part of what is called the Black Death Group. Well, who are they? They're a group of people who operate largely on the dark web. They claim that they kidnap and that they sex traffic people all around the world. Now, the dark web group, they're well known to police, to FBI, to the government, long before this happens. I mean, they're known because what they do is they kidnap people. They take the most horrific images of the people that they've kidnapped, just like Chloe, naked, bound on a floor. And then what they do is they put these up on the dark web. It's said that what they then do from there is they use these images to sell the victims. So if they've got a victim that they think is worth a lot of money, that person can be sold for up to £250,000. That's absolutely fucking insane. Oh my god. It's just the entire fucking situation is insane. The money's insane. Everything around it is just completely fucked. Basically what they're doing is they're just taking people and they're selling them to become sex slaves. So in the case of Chloe, that was the plan. But her captors, her kidnappers, they had a second plan on the go. They decided that because Chloe was a model back in the UK, they would try and ransom Chloe. So they reached out and they asked for £300,000 for the return of Chloe. These ransom demands, they were being left with her agent back in the UK. Now her agent, of course, fucking shitting himself, of course, was literally just going straight to the police. He was going straight to the police and going, I'm getting emails from her kidnappers saying, unless you can produce £300,000, she's going to be sold on the dark web. So who was her kidnapper specifically? He was Lucas Herba, a 30-year-old Polish-born man living in Birmingham in the UK. Luca had been a part of the Black Death group for a while now. Now Herba, I'm going to call him Herba. Herba is the main man involved really here with Chloe. He's the only person that she really has any sort of contact with during this time. So Chloe's asking Herba, what is happening here? Why am I here? What are you planning to do with me? And but Herba, he was really open to chatting with Chloe. So they talked a lot, and he answered all of her questions. He told her that her photos were being auctioned on the dark web for nearly $250,000. And during this time, he continued to have phone calls with his boss, updating him on how Chloe was doing, making sure that all the time Chloe was being kept alive. So his boss was phoning to make sure that this girl who was going to bring Black Death Group so much money was definitely still alive in this room in Italy. Fucking outrageous. Oh my god, it's horrible. So they talk about the fact that Chloe has a young son. Her son was 8 years old. He's back in the UK. And he's being protected from this information. Now this information, this really surprised Herba. It took him by complete surprise. He seemed to be really shocked by the fact that she had a child. Chloe says of her time in the farmhouse, I was losing all hope of ever seeing my family again. I imagined my son growing up without a mother and my mum without a daughter. At some point I heard the sound of helicopters circling somewhere overhead the house. It must have been for about 10 or 15 minutes, and it was enough to make Herba paranoid. It could be police, it could have been the military. My heart was racing that it was going to be a rescue attempt, but when it went away, I was devastated. The sound faded away and then it just stopped. So during the time that Chloe was held captive, she asked Herba, what will happen when I'm actually auctioned? What will happen when someone actually buys me? His reply is he said, you will be sold to a rich man, and when he and his friends, when they're bored of you, they'll feed you to the tigers. Oh my God. Fucking horrible. So now photographs began to emerge of Chloe lying on the floor wearing a low-cut top. Another photograph appeared of her lying in a really skimpy outfit on a bed. These hit the newspapers and the internet very quickly, and they're really disturbing. These photographs, they're really disturbing. She kind of looks like she's dead in them, as in she's like so still and so pale. They're just, they're horrible. Back in the UK, her agent is under immense pressure to explain what is this fucking job that you've sent her on. And while he's giving police all the details that he has, it doesn't really help the police in Italy or the UK police who've gone over. They can't find her. They just don't know where she is. He says this was a legitimate photo shoot. He had checked all of these details out. He had checked the address, and he was sure he was sending her somewhere safe. So while this panic and this search is going on, Chloe still in the room with Herba, and they're talking every day. She says, he told me I looked beautiful several times, and I thanked him. I didn't want to upset him. He said he really wanted to kiss me, but I replied, maybe, once I was free. She says I was just leading him on and hanging on to the thought that he might release me. So now the police are in overdrive. The British model kidnapped, forced into a suitcase. Where is she? Is she alive? Are police about to discover that she's been sold into the sex trade? Are they about to discover her dismembered body in a suitcase? Who knows what the fuck is going to happen here? After 6 days and an extensive manhunt, Chloe turns up at the British consulate in Italy with Herba by her side. She describes it like this. We arrived at the British consulate and he told me I could go in. He was coming with me, but I had to say that he was my friend. When we got to the doors, 2 armed soldiers were standing by an intercom. I buzzed it, and a woman's voice asked if I had an appointment. I said no, it's an emergency. I need to talk in private. The door opened. We walked in. I walked up to the woman at the counter and I said to her, I've been abducted. She asked me my name and I told her. He was behind me. I saw him put on his sunglasses. I thought this was bizarre. The woman said, come with me. Herba looked annoyed when she told him he wasn't allowed to come with us. And when he tried to insist, she said no. He then said, I'm leaving, and he started to walk away, and the woman told him, don't go anywhere, we need you here. She opened the door, and we went through to a private room. I told her I'd been kidnapped in a modelling studio, and I broke down in tears. I started telling her the story, and she began to cry. She told me she knew who I was. She'd seen the headlines. I didn't tell her the man I was with was my abductor because I was still scared he would have me killed. But the woman had already called the police. Okay, so the big questions. Why was Chloe released? Why did Herba take her himself to the British consulate? But most importantly, this question. Why is there so much doubt around Chloe's story? Why is the whole thing considered a scam? Let's look a little bit more closely at the days where she was held captive. Right, so you remember I told you that she said that she was chained to a chest of drawers. Well, a bit of that might be true, but in a later interview, she actually says, oh yeah, that was actually only for one night. For the rest of the time, she slept in Herba's bed. And when she's asked, why did you sleep next to him? She said, oh, well, he had knives and he had weapons in the room and I was terrified. So I just went along with really whatever he asked me. Okay? Fair enough. Asked the question, did you have sex with Herba? She says, no. He masturbated, but we didn't have sex. Asked why she was photographed in a cafe with Herba during the time of her captivity, laughing, joking, and drinking coffee, she says, I just did what he told me. Asked why she was photographed shoe shopping with Herba, she says, he offered to buy me trainers, so I said yes and I went with him. Asked the question, so you weren't actually kidnapped as such. If you were free to go shopping and you were free to go to coffee shops, you weren't really kidnapped. And she says, yes, I was. I just was doing whatever Herba wanted. Asked, did you already know Herba prior to this? She says, yes. Well, that's a fucking twist. The fucking twist in the story this is. Now, she doesn't give this information up freely. This is dragged out of her by police. But yes, she had already met Herba. So a few weeks prior to this Italy trip, Chloe had gone to Paris. You may remember that I mentioned it in the beginning. So Chloe had gone there and she was to be photographed for a magazine, but there was a terrorist attack and the shoot was cancelled. Now, Chloe had no money when she was there, and so a kindly man offered her some money to get back to the airport and get her flight back to the UK. Who was the man? The man was Herba. Now, does this add any credibility to the story? I'm not sure. This is a moment of pause for me in the story. This is a moment where I need to be like, let's have a think about this one. Because, well, sorry, I just keep making noise. There's a couple of ways to go on this. Either she did know Herba, and yeah, he just gave her money to get back and get a taxi. and he was a random stranger to her, and that was the extent of their interaction, or something else happened in that interaction where a plan or a plot was put into place. The audio that I played in the beginning, I'm going to play it again because this has caused a lot of speculation. Now, I'll give you the visual for this if you haven't seen it. When you hear this is Chloe standing outside of her home back in the UK, I think 3 weeks after getting back from Italy. She's standing there, and it's a sort of lovely sunny day. She's wearing a very tight-fitting athletic outfit. Okay, I'm not judging that. She might have been just about to go to the gym. Who knows? But she's perfectly groomed. Every inch of her is absolutely groomed. She holds a piece of paper, and quite frankly, she looks a little bit bored as she reads this piece of paper. And this is where it just gets a bit sticky for people, and they just can't quite understand what she's doing at this moment, because she's standing there looking healthy, happy, not affected, doesn't really care, but it's the voice that she reads this statement in. She sounds so bored. And I know, oh my God, I know how many times have we been down the road of you can't say that someone feels a certain way about something just because of how they react after it, whatever. You know, if someone's not crying their heart out, it means that they're guilty and all that sort of shit. Not even talking about that. It's just, if you've got 30 seconds, go and find it, because it is weird the way that she's just, it's like literally someone has just said to her, Chloe, read this, and she's gone, okay, yeah, whatever, right, fine, I'll read it. So here it is, again.
I've been through a terrifying experience. I feared for my life, second by second, minute by minute, hour by hour. I am incredibly grateful to the Italian and UK authorities for all they have done to secure my safe release. I have just arrived home after 4 weeks of being in Italy, and I haven't had the time to gather my thoughts. I am not at liberty to say anything further until I have been debriefed by the UK police.
So the theory that is widely popular is that Chloe was actually in on this from the very beginning. She was in on the whole entire kidnapping situation. The whole thing was a setup. They would stage this kidnapping, they would ask for a ransom, and whether that came from the public or that came from the government, it didn't matter. They would somehow split that money. On numerous TV shows here in the UK, Chloe's asked, why are you so composed about the story? Why do you never seem to show any sign of distress when you talk about it? Her answer to this is, well, I spent time in Italy crying my heart out about the situation that I was in. And when I got back to the UK, that stopped because, I just realised I had my life back. Okay, fair enough. So where's the story at now? Both Herba and his brother, who was the other kidnapper, they've been arrested. Now, one of them is in prison in Italy, and one of them is in the UK. Chloe maintains her story is true. Herba has been asked directly, did Chloe have anything to do with this plan? He's never given a clear answer. So what do you think? A setup? The truth? The thing that adds more fuel to the fire is that when she got home to the UK, she fired her agent and she signed with a much more prominent modelling agency. And she very quickly, I think it was within about 3 weeks, was doing an incredibly sexy photo shoot wearing hardly any clothes at all. She was quickly appearing on lots of TV shows, really willing to tell her story. Now, none of that, I'm not saying for a second, none of that makes Chloe a liar at all. But there is room in this story for doubt. There is. Even take aside the behaviour after she came home. The photographs of her having coffee. The photographs of her going out and buying shoes with the man who was supposedly her captor. These are all really strange inconsistencies. It just all adds up to being a bit odd. And I know I'm waving a loaded gun around here when I mention Sherry Papini. And that's because there have been developments in the Sherry Papini case. And again, we're in that area of victim blaming, victim shaming. And I want to say, I don't really believe Sherry Papini's story. I don't. But my mind's not really made up on Chloe. I'm leaning towards liar, but I just can't be 100% sure. But if we're going to talk about this, and I would like to talk about it, if we're going to talk about these kind of cases, because there are so many of them, there's so many of these cases, let's talk about them. But let's do it in a really civil way. And remember that there's room for everyone's opinion. So, the case against the kidnappers is set to be tried in December. And Chloe maintains this: the truth will come out, and those who doubt me will be sorry that they did. And so ends the story of Chloe Ayling.
Do you get mad when listening to true crime? Well, so do I. If you want a weekly true crime podcast that says what you're thinking, then grab a beer and pull up a deck chair. This is Cambo from True Crime Island, another true crime podcast, and maintain the rage with me. Visit truecrimeisland.com, where you can download or stream each episode, plus there's links to iTunes and social media. Don't forget to delete your browser history. This is True Crime Island.
This story begins when Marla Hanson, aged 19, moved from Dallas, Texas to New York City. So who is Marla? Why did she move? Well, back in Texas, Marla Hanson was a real estate agent, and a job promotion within her firm saw her be able to move to New York City to follow a better job. So she was getting a promotion. Now, while in New York, Marla took a part-time job modelling for extra income. Very, very attractive. Dark-haired, very beautiful face, just really gorgeous. So Marla was doing a wee bit of work for a company called Petite Model Management. Pretty sure that title is self-explanatory. So she's doing quite well. She quickly kind of went from like doing a part-time job of modelling and doing her full-time job until actually she had enough modelling work that she could leave the job behind and become a full-time model. So she's starting to make pretty decent money. Now, during this time, she lived in various different apartments. She lived kind of all over bits of New York. Wherever work was really taking her was where she was moving. So one of the apartments that she rented had a landlord named Steve Roth. Steve Roth was a TV makeup artist and he was working freelance, but he also owned some property. Now, one of the apartments that he had came up. It was available. Marla was looking for somewhere to live, and so she ends up renting an apartment from him. I think she'd met Steve Roth through a photographer that she was working with. He was like a friend, kind of one of those friend of a friend situations. So during her time, when she was his tenant, she had some contact with him, you know, as you would with your landlord. But she wasn't there for very long, and she moved out of that property and she was in living somewhere else. Now, when she leaves, she doesn't actually get back her security deposit, and she wants it back. She'd given him like a $500 security deposit, and she was looking to get it back. But Steve was being a little bit difficult about getting it back to her. And even though she'd moved on to a new house, she was still wanting it back. So she's working hard at this time, Marla. She's going from job to job, and she's saying to different friends, you know, there might become a point where maybe she would like to think about becoming an actress. She'd like to see how her career goes. So she's kind of left behind her whole kind of real estate job. You know, she's come here and she's discovered, actually, I'm quite good as a model. I keep getting job after job. So maybe this is the way that I should go in my life. So good for Marla. In June 1986, Marla Hanson is in a bar in Manhattan. She's with a couple of friends. She's there for a night out, but she's also there for another reason. She's there because after trying to chase down this security deposit that she never got back, Steve Roth finally says, okay, I'll meet you on this night in this bar and I'll give you your money back. So there she is, she's in the bar, she's waiting, and a man approaches her and he says, can I speak privately with you outside of the bar? She agrees, and she doesn't know this man, but she agrees and she steps outside. She says to him, just for a minute, I'm waiting on somebody who's got something for me, but I'll step outside with you for just 1 second. Outside, it's starting to get dark and the streetlights are on. When she gets outside, the man turns to her, he grabs her face, and she feels the arms of another man hold her shoulders. In the next 30 seconds, Marla's face will be slashed open with a blade. 3 cuts are given to Marla's face. At first, she thinks she's being sprayed with a liquid. She doesn't realise that it's her own blood that she can feel. The man with the razor slashes a deep cut into Marla's cheek, another across her forehead, and one by the side of her left eye. As this is happening, only steps away is her former landlord, Steve Roth, watching the attack. He's standing under the streetlight. He's watching the whole thing, making sure that no one else is approaching. The 2 men who carry out the attack and Steve Roth, they then run from the scene. They leave Marla in complete shock, in unimaginable pain, and she stumbles back into the bar. Inside the bar, people gather around her as she tries to explain to them what has happened. She's given towels to put over her face, and the bartender says to her, "Do not look in the mirror." So Marla is then rushed to hospital, and she immediately undergoes surgery, and she receives 150 stitches in her face. The 3 scars down her face would be permanent. Oh, horrific. Just fucking horrific. Do you know, researching this made me think about, it's just the worst. It's the fucking worst. Somebody slashing your face open. Fuck sake. Fuck me, man. That's terrible. It made me think about, I don't know if this is happening elsewhere in the world, but there's been a really terrible time at the moment in London for acid attacks. This culture of, we'll take some acid and throw it into the face of someone who's standing in the queue for a club, or some person who's just walking down the street. Let's throw some fucking acid in their face. It's just the absolutely, I think now actually, I was hearing this in the news last week, the government have brought in incredibly now strict punishment for anyone who's caught carrying acid. Because for a while it's kind of gone a bit like there's been like a whole series of acid attacks have happened, and it doesn't really seem like the people who've actually like thrown the acid have actually really had to, go through much of a trial for what they've actually done. But now the laws are stricter on it, which is good. It's just oh God. I'll come on to what happens with the rest of Marla's story in a second, which is just horrible. But a psychologist talking about Marla's attack specifically said the thing about actually attacking someone in the face is that it is actually the ultimate sadomasochistic control. It's actually the best way that you, as someone who is that driven, could actually control someone, because you're changing how someone actually looks in the mirror every single day. You're changing the thing in them that they see in themselves every single day. You're changing the way in the world that they look physically, how they identify themselves. And therefore, the person who's slashed you, the person who's thrown the acid in your face, the person who's burned your face, don't matter, they're always in your head. They're always going to be in your head because they've disfigured, they've done something to the thing that you're seeing constantly, all the time. So Steve Roth, he is arrested. And along with 2 men who carried out the attack, their names are Stephen Bowman and Darren Norman. Now I'm going to point out that, see, the 2 men who carried out the attack, they are 2 black men. And I'm going to point that out now because this becomes important later. So Steve Roth, he's tried separately from the 2 attackers. Ultimately, when the trial comes, what transpires is that at some point during the time that Marla had been a tenant for Steve Roth, he had attempted to seduce her, and she had rejected these advances. She wasn't into any kind of a relationship with him. She wasn't wanting anything from him. So, as an act of revenge, he hired Mr. Bowman and Mr. Norman to carry out the attack on Marla's face. The headlines read, "Model's face is slashed open because she refused sex with creepy landlord. Man orders attack on model's face as revenge." So this goes to court. But this is where it becomes incredibly frustrating. What happens to Marla is unbelievably infuriating. Marla's lawyer does a pretty excellent job of laying out the facts. She lays out the story, and she gets the jury to see just how much Marla is entirely the victim here. She is the victim in that she came to New York City to be a model. She happened to, at one point, have a landlord who wanted more from her than she was willing to give. And when she said no, he took a revenge attack, and he took it upon her face. That's how he did it. Now, the defence lawyer for the two attackers, he's an absolute prick of a man. An absolute prick. He tries to do the exact opposite. He cross-examines Marla, and he absolutely annihilates her on the stand. He gets up to cross-examine her, and the first thing he says is, "Nice performance, Miss Hanson." He questions the fact that during her time in hospital, while she was recovering, she had given a couple of press conferences. Now she says, I couldn't do anything about it. The press were literally banging my hospital door down. They wanted an interview. They wanted something. So I just did it. He says, interesting. Okay. Who else did you talk to during that time? She says, well, a few different publications came to me. They wanted to talk about the attack. They wanted to talk about their story. And he says, okay, well, who are they? They were New Yorker magazine, Cosmopolitan, and Glamour magazine. All high profile. So he takes the jury down this road of saying, well, hasn't this worked out very well? She's getting some really good publicity out of all of this. He then brings up every man that she's ever encountered professionally since her time in New York that she's ever had sex with. So she slept with a few men. Big fucking deal. He's bringing them all up. He's going, you met this photographer and you had sex. And she's going, well, yeah, I did, but we went out on 5 dates. We had quite a nice time. He's basically going, you're a media whore. You're a media slut. You're a star fucker. You're just wanting attention. It's so infuriating. He's just making that thing of going, you're a young model, you're working in the industry and you're trying to fuck your way around all these guys, and unfortunately you just messed with the wrong people, and so this attack actually is because of your behaviour. It's not because of anyone else, it's because of your behaviour. Fucking outrageous. She says, yeah, I did sleep with people. Yes, I did. I had sex with a few men. And he says, that's because you're a fucking devil woman. You just seduce men to get your own gain. That's what it is. He then has the audacity in court to ask her, what were you wearing on the night of the attack? She says, well, I was wearing a sweater. And he says, yeah, you were. But it was really low cut. Your breasts were out. He then says to her, were you wearing underwear on the night that you were attacked? Now that gets quickly shut down by her lawyer, who quite rightly says, this fucking lawyer is trying to make this about something that it's not, trying to make it into some sort of sex attack, and it wasn't that. This was a revenge attack. This was not sex-related. It was sex-related in the fact that Steve Roth was raging that he came on to her and she didn't want sex. But this wasn't sexually led, this attack. This was very premeditated. This was very, come outside of the bar, we're going to slash your face up because you're not having sex with this guy. But to try and turn Marla into some kind of a fucking temptress who's trying to shag every man, outrageous. Finally, and this, oh god, it just gets worse. Finally, this absolute prick of a man, he turns to Marla and he says, can you be sure that the two men you've pointed out here are your actual attackers? Now, you'll remember I said to you a second ago, both these men were black. That's really important here because she says, yes, I can. And he says, no, you can't. Because you said it happened in a blur. You said the whole attack happened really fast. You're just picking two random black men. You have a deep-seated racism in you, and you're just picking two random black men to punish for your attack. And she says, no, I can tell you, it was these two men. I mean, it's fucking ludicrous at this point. Because he's doing a brilliant job annihilating her, which should not be allowed. It should not be allowed that she should have to sit there and go through that. It's just so stupid. But she endures it. She keeps her calm. She gets through it. But she's obviously livid beyond belief about it, as is her lawyer. So, the press are all over this story. They want to hear from Marla, and Marla is happy to talk. And she says there has been a huge injustice in this courtroom. I've been massively mistreated. I've been treated like a criminal when in fact I am the victim. So the trial of all three men involved comes to an end. Steve Rothman is given 15 years in prison for being the mastermind behind the attack, and the two attackers are given the same sentence of 15 years. Just before the whole trial comes to an end, the judge presiding over the whole entire thing wades in on the treatment of Marla. Judge Ed Koch openly berates Marla and her lawyer in the courtroom in front of the jury, in front of everyone, because they've been vocal about the injustice. He tells Marla she had no right to speak to the press about the cross-examination. He tells her that she was completely compromising the whole entire case by publicly saying that she was treated as a criminal. He does this with a really vicious tone, and when he's done, he leaves the court. There's then a short recess. After the recess, he comes back and he says to Marla and her lawyer that he's sorry. He thinks that he overreacted. And he wants to say, I'm so sorry for the way that I spoke to you there. What happened in that recess? That's what I want to know. I'd like to know, there's one or two things that happened in that recess. Either he's taken himself into his chambers and he's gone, fuck, you're a judge. You are not supposed to have an outburst like that in your court. Or he's gone back there and somebody has kicked his arse and said to him, you go back out there and you fucking apologise to that woman who is a victim, who's sitting there with her face slashed, hugely fucking slashed 3 times, who's had to go through this horrible experience. You go out there and you apologise. So I don't know. So the 3 men who committed this in prison. What happens to Marla? Marla goes into a long period of post-traumatic stress disorder. She becomes almost reclusive. Marla's career was the last thing on her mind. After a couple of years of deep depression, some very good friends of Marla, she puts it, they almost forced her, and I'm glad that they did, but they almost force her to seek help. So she does, and you know what? Marla's gone on to live a really good life. She's married, she's an advocate for victim rights, and she works as a screenwriter. So ends the story of Marla Hansen. What binds these stories? I think they're both victims. I think whether Chloe's story is true or not, I think she's still a victim of something. She's still a victim in some way of the industry that she works in. Marla, very clearly, a victim. I also think both these cases are interesting in terms of how they've been dealt with by the press, by people who hear these stories, by how they're told, how they are understood. There's a real I don't know, there's a real thing in there, isn't there, of when it comes to models, actors, dancers, there's a real kind of like, I'm not saying people don't value those people's lives. I think people, because of the profession that these people have chosen, there's less value when something happens to them, and I think that's really evident in the Marla case. I think the underlying truth of everything that lawyer was attacking Marla for on the stand was, yeah, but you know what? You're just a model. You're just a pretty face, sweetheart. That's all you are. You've got nothing about you. It's really just, if that had been a fucking doctor sitting there who'd gone outside of a pub and had their face slashed up, they wouldn't have come under the same scrutiny that Marla had to go under because she was a model. I just think there's something in that's something that's really true. Okay, right, well, I hope you enjoyed those 2 stories. I really enjoyed looking at those 2 stories, I will be honest. Okay, that's the end of the episode. So, just a reminder, I am on Patreon. If you ever want to support the podcast, you can do that with like $1 a month, £1 a month. You can do a wee one-off, entirely up to you. This was episode 28 and episode 30 is coming. Episode 30 is a special ESP episode. So, as the kids would say, get me on the socials. That's what the kids say, I think. So, yeah, I'm on all the social medias. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. It's not hard to find me. If you wanted to, you could. I just want to say thank you as well to all the other podcasts who support me. The support I'm getting from other podcasts is absolutely unreal. So thank you, all of you. Thank you so much. As always, if you know a great story, if you know an extraordinary story, get in touch. Okay, goodbye.
Hello, this is Ben.
And this is Alex.
Do you like unsolved mysteries and urban legends? If you do, you should tune into our podcast, Mysteries and Urban Legends, every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, as we explore deeper into unsolved mysteries and into the meanings and origins of urban legends. Look for us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, and all other major podcast carriers.
Hey everyone, my name is Amanda, and along with my co-host Kara, we are Crime Quest, a true crime podcast with cases and stories mostly out of Central and Richmond, Virginia. We cover cases that you may not have heard of before, and most of them happened in our neck of the woods. Patricia Cornwell even based some of her books on our city's most insane cases. In 1997, Richmond earned the title of the country's murder capital, and we've been bragging about it ever since. So add yet another true crime podcast to your list by looking up Crime Quest, all one word, on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Podomatic, and come join us for a murder tour. Thanks and enjoy!